when it comes to an introduction. And also asked, how long can you go? Which is not something you want to ask a Master Mason, especially one who likes to talk. As we welcome Right Worshipful, newly minted Right Worshipful brother, Bob Siebold, 33rd degree. He's also an MSA award winner, and for the key of this conversation, the assistant director of membership development for the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite Northern Masonic Jurisdiction. Brother,
Take a breath. Take a breath.
that's a lot. Do you go with the whole title, parts of it, or just call me Bob? What do you?
No, I am totally just call me Bob. When I travel, and I go to a lot of valleys, and I've got guys coming up, illustrious this, illustrious that. Like, that's very nice. The greatest title I ever received is brother. Just call me Bob and show me where the bathroom is, because I've been in my car for 4 hours. So,
Nice.
and they'll all say sure. So it's we're in good shape. But no, absolutely call me Bob.
Absolutely. All right. And I have to say, the newly minted part, I was there at the Grand Lodge of New York session, back in May, early May, when Bob was announced on the spot as one of our new Right Worshipful brothers at large for Most Worshipful Stephen Adam Rubin. And a lot of the reason why you got that special title is because of the work that you put into the subject for this podcast, as we get ready to talk about membership retention, membership development, however you want to look at it,
Sure.
based on a lot of the research that's been going on with the Scottish Rite Northern Masonic jurisdiction. For our listeners in the know, they'll kind of recognize you from a few years ago where you came on the podcast to talk about this initiative.
Yep.
What are some of the trends that you've now seen at the Scottish Rite when it comes to the work going in to increase membership or improve retention?
Well, the big thing in fraternity today is everyone's saying that Freemasonry is dying because of death.
Mm,
And that is partially true, partially true. But what we're finding is that we can bring men into fraternity, but we're not so great at retaining them in fraternity. We looked at that very, very hard. I actually worked with several people at the Supreme Council, some of our actives and whatnot, and we realized that if we don't start retaining our members, that's a bigger problem than actually losing them to death or NPD. So retention has really risen to the top of our conversation. And we realize that retention and, quite frankly, restoration of men who have gone sideways in their Masonic membership, for whatever reason, they lose their job, they move away, there's a loss of interest, whatever it might be. If they do rekindle that membership back, we have a great opportunity to bring them back not only into the craft, but also bring them back into Scottish Rite if they previously had a Scottish Rite membership. So recruitment is a big piece. We can talk about that certainly tonight, but restoration is huge, and also that whole retention piece of making sure that we retain our members and give them the kind of journey that they're looking for, quite frankly.
mm. What's always fascinating to me is there's many different camps on the membership or the decline or the contraction or whatever you want to call it that's happening in Freemasonry. Some people try to explain it away as like, oh, well, it's just part of the actual, natural ebb and flow of any kind of membership that would happen in any kind of organization, which,
Yep.
okay, that there could be some fact and some numbers that would support that. Others will say, well, what do you mean? It's going back to what masonry was. It wasn't really meant for everybody. There was these explosions that were happening with the baby boomer generation and those that fought in World War II, and they came home, and those men wanted to join something, and they came to Masonic halls, and it became more of a social setting, and it
Correct.
changed. So there's some of that as well. And then there's the rest of us that are going, well, hey, we're closing the doors literally on histories in communities. And there's men who have been a part of this organization, this fraternity, for over 100 years or more. We
Sure.
have generations invested in this. And we're just going to say, well, this is just a natural part of things. And there's some of us that are standing up and saying, well, what can we do?
Yeah, one of the things that really scares me a lot, Michael, is what I call a generational transfer of knowledge. And I say this comically, but it's not funny, really. I hope 30 years from now that there's not five guys sitting in this beautiful lodge room going, okay, now we're Masons. Now what do we do?
Mm,
All right. Because there's no one there to transfer that knowledge of how does a lodge work? How does a valley work? How does a York Rite body work? What does the shrine really do? We need to have men in place that can transfer that knowledge when they're still with us. All right. So these new men coming in understand, how do you stand in a Masonic lodge? How do you vote? All right. when do we use signs of recognition? Why is someone called right worshipful and only one called worshipful? Why do we have a worshipful master? What does all that mean? So we need to have that transfer of knowledge from one generation to the other. And that's really what scares me. And I agree with what you're saying. That could be lost to
Mm,
antiquity. And that's what we don't want to do. And quite frankly, I think Freemasonry has touched so many facets of society that needs to be talked about. It needs to be brought to the head of the conversation. We've done so much for the world, quite frankly, and it's all been good with the hospitals that we've built, the foundations that we've created, the people that we have touched positively in the world. I think that Freemasonry has a great story to tell, and if we're not telling that story and we're not talking about our legacy and our traditions, that can be an issue. So that's where the retention piece and the mentoring piece really plays a big part in that, because I'll often say to a lodge or to a Scottish Rite Valley, if you're not retaining your members, eventually, I don't know if you got the memo, we're all going to die. All right.
mm.
Guess what? That's going to happen. Okay. Sorry about that. You might think you're going to live forever, but guess what? You're not. All right. Neither am I. Neither are you. Anybody listening to this podcast, sorry, don't pull over and cry. It's going to be okay. But at the end of the day, what we've really got to think about is, why we're here and why we have the opportunity. How do we mentor these young men? How do we mentor this new generation that really wants to embrace what we have, quite frankly? And I'm kind of leaning into what the millennials are thinking, but we want to make sure that we're doing that. So, because we don't, we really will be a footnote in history. We're going to be a special on the History Channel 30
Mm,
years from now, and that's what we don't want. We don't
yeah.
want. So now's the time to do that. I believe we're really at a crossroads of if we don't do something, well, then what are we going to be left with? And that's what we don't want.
And one of the other things that's really fascinating to me about this is that it kind of is a Blue Lodge centric problem. And when I say Blue Lodge centric problem, is that it starts there. That if
Sure,
we can't attract and engage and retain this brother through those first 3 degrees and then beyond,
correct,
there is no future for our concordant and appendant bodies.
absolutely.
But when it comes to trying to provide a roadmap or doing the tough work of the research and getting, it's the the Scottish Rite Northern Masonic jurisdiction that seems to be rolling up their sleeves and taking an active lead in this.
Yes. Well, I mean, you take our Not Just a Man of Mason program. I mean, that's a phenomenal program where there's collateral material that we will give, a lodge with the support of a valley, and there's printed collateral, there's social media collateral, there's banners that you can get, and it's all free of charge, because we know that the pool that we pull from is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I can't go down to the Lions Club and say, hey, you want to become a Scottish Rite Mason? Can't do that. Okay, I can't go to a Rotary meeting and say, hey, guess what? Would you like to become a Scottish Rite Mason? It just doesn't work. All right, so I've got a specific pool that my ambassadors, what we call them, they're the ones who go to the Blue Lodges and really talk up Scottish Rite for membership. These men only have a very, very small pool to pull from. And unfortunately, year over year over year, it's gotten smaller. So one of our first charges, quite frankly, I think is to help build those Blue Lodges. I was did some training over the weekend. I did it with the Valley of Michigan. And we talked about, one of the first things that a Scottish Rite ambassador does. They're really our frontline men. They're the ones that are going into the Blue Lodges and saying, let me talk to you about the value of Scottish Rite membership. And I said to him, I said, your number one priority is to create Scottish Rite Masons. But I said, in a linear perspective, you also really need to say, okay, what can I do to help those fledgling and those weak lodges? Let me talk about the Not Just a Man of Mason program. What can we do to partner with them to go into their communities and start to really talk about Blue Lodge Freemasonry? And you're right. That's where it all starts. That's where
Mm,
it all starts. And the Scottish Rite has done a phenomenal job at finding out, where are those areas that want to embrace Freemasonry, that have a synergistic relationship with what we're all about. I mean, I can tell you, I just wrote something today about this. We've got first responders. They love what we're about. First responders love Freemasonry. The overarching question is are we going to them and talking to them about the attributes of membership? Then you've got military, active military, and you've got military veterans. They love the structure, they love the history, they love the order of Freemasonry. But are we going out and are we talking to them? And then certainly, the millennials, our marketing communications group did a phenomenal job at finding out research about millennials. They're really our sweet spot. The millennials like what we're about.
mm,
They like the charitable aspect. They like the historical aspect. They like the journey that Freemasonry has created. What we've got to do though is reach out to them and say, you know what, it's not going to be your granddad's lodge. We're going to open up our doors because we want to open up our hearts and minds to what you want to do. Just like someone did for me. I've been a Mason over 40 years. 40 years ago, I was allowed to come in and have my own ideas. We ought to allow these younger folks, this new generation, the millennials, to do the same thing, because Freemasonry is changing. It's
Yeah.
absolutely changing. The tenets haven't changed, but the programming has changed for sure.
And Brother Bob, you did such a good job of setting up, asking and answering your own question. I was like, oh, I'm not going to be able to use this analogy for someone who's just listening that has an interest in Freemasonry. Like, what are they talking about? Blue Lodge, Freemasonry, Scottish Rite. Like,
Yeah.
Here's how I would describe it to where I think 90% of people listening will get. It's the difference between being a white card Costco member and the black executive card Costco member.
I love that. That's 100%.
At the end of the day, you're all Costco members, right? But
Yeah.
in Blue Lodge, which is where the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry take place, I would say you do have very engaged brothers. So you will have some guys that are the black card VIPs, man. They are in there every weekend shopping. They buy everything. They're so brand loyal.
Yep.
But a majority are probably also going to be the white card holders that this is all they do in Freemasonry. They may be passively attending meetings or not fully engaged with all of the functions of their lodge, which is fine.
Yep.
What makes it interesting is when you go up to the Scottish Rite, that's where that's like the black card VIP club level there for Costco members. So what I find fascinating is that maybe what we're doing, if we stay in that Costco membership analogy, is are we just not doing a good enough job of explaining the benefits of being a more engaged member? Is that part of the problem?
Well, it could be. I think, one of the things that I teach my ambassadors when I have them in training is I say, when I first joined Scottish Rite, hey, you got to join, let me punch you in the ribs and let's move on. You got to do this, sign the petition, give me $150. Those days are over. I mean, now when you're talking to a millennial or whoever it might be, you've got to explain the value of what our program is about. All right. Because the Scottish Rite is tremendously value rich. If you think about the programs that we have, the self-development programs that we offer, the charitable endeavors that we're involved in, the national programs that we're involved in, how we touch Freemasonry as a family, for instance, with the Not Just a Man, a Mason program, beafreemason.org. We spent a lot of time and resources on those things. We care about the whole thing. So I agree with you that it's somebody who's very serious about fraternity and wants to get the big picture and wants to really throw more light on that journey. I couldn't agree with you more. It's interesting when I do presentations for our lodges, and I talk, Scottish Rite is 29 degrees, 6 core values, 1 extraordinary life. And guys will go, raise their hand and they'll go, well, does that mean I get 29 degrees in a weekend? And I'm like, well, no, that's not what we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's a marathon. It's certainly not a sprint. But each one of those degrees is going to tell you something a little bit different about yourself and about the fraternity and how you should act and walk and talk as a man. I said, I've watched all those degrees multiple times and they always teach me something different, literally every time I watch them. So that I think is what embraces these men and say, you know what, I want that. I want to learn more. The other thing that's interesting is, to the converse of what you're saying, I go into lodges where I'll do a presentation and I'll say, if you'd like to see me after the meeting, while we're downstairs, having coffee and cake, please come up to me and I can talk to you about, the value of membership and how you join. And, the secretary, as I'm walking out of the room, will go, you're not going to get anybody to join. And I'll go, why? Because, we know that if you Scottish Rite guys come in, you're gonna suck the life out of these guys and they're not going to come back. And that means we're going to lose them. And I'll be like, well, that's not necessarily true. I said, what we find in our research is that men who actually are very involved in a concordant body not only stay in the fraternity longer, but they're actually more dedicated to their Blue Lodge than they were before joining a concordant body. So really what you're cementing is you're cementing men for life, as opposed to 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years and they go, oh, I've had enough, I'm out. So actually, I agree with you. I see where you're coming from, but the concordant body story, I think is it's really the foothold that keeps men involved. I truly believe that. Whatever your passion is, whether it's Scottish Rite, whether it's the Shrine, whether it's the York Rite Bodies, Grotto, I don't care what it is, pick your poison. But at the end of the day, you're going to stay with your Blue Lodge. You're going to be more active because of that concordant body connection. So I know that for a fact. I've got the data that proves that. So that's 100% for sure.
We've caught up with Right Worshipful Brother, the newly minted Right Worshipful Brother, Bob Siebold, who's also a 33rd degree Freemason, and most importantly, the Assistant Director of Membership and Retention for the Scottish Rite Northern Masonic Jurisdiction Supreme Council. I think I
Well,
got that in somewhat of an order.
we're going to give you some Masonic bling for that, so you can, walk around with a new medal. My
I'm
goodness.
gonna need a Masonic breath mask, some oxygen after that. And we're here to talk about the membership issue. I am lucky to work with him on the Grand Lodge of New York Strategic Planning Committee, and I should say we're all lucky that he's sharing his information that he's taking from Scottish Rite and seeing how we can address this issue on a Blue Lodge level. If you're watching us on YouTube Live, one of our streamers, don't worry, we're going to have some charts and numbers that Bob has provided. But first, I kind of wanted to get to something that you had mentioned in one of our planning committee meetings, and I was like, oh, I gotta jot this down. Robert Putnam's Join or Die documentary on Netflix. And you said, you guys all got to watch this. Bob, tell me why this should be shown in every lodge and valley.
Yeah, well, let me go back a little bit. Putnam wrote a book called Bowling Alone. All right, and the synopsis of the book was he had a friend that owned a series of bowling alleys, and when he first got into the bowling business, this was the 50s, 60s, 70s. It wasn't uncommon. My dad was a perfect example of this. My dad bowled for his lodge. All right, I remember Thursday night, Leamark Lanes in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. There you go. What a memory. My dad would put his bowling shirt on, and he'd get in the car and drive to Leamark Lanes. Wouldn't get home to about 11:30, but he'd bowl from about 7:30 to about 10:30, whatever is at night. And he'd go bowling with his Masonic brothers. But everybody bowled in teams, and if you walked into a bowling alley during those years, the 50s, 60s, 70s, bowling alleys were packed with teams. All right. What Putnam's friend understood and started to see was that the leagues were deteriorating. All right, people still were bowling. There was more people bowling than there was back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. You believe it or not, but they were bowling alone.
Hmm.
And what was interesting was that he said to Putnam, I don't know what it is. I don't know if this is a phenomenon. I don't know really how to put my finger on it. But you're a social scientist, um, from Harvard University. You should really take a hard look at this. And what he found was that people had a difficulty connecting. All right, yet they were yearning to be part of something. What a dichotomy that is. Um, Hence the fact he then moving into 2025. Out came that movie, Join or Die. And what he found was that there is a microcosm of people in fraternity, excuse me, in life that want a fraternity. They want to belong to something. All right. They're attracted to whether it's the knitting club or the book club or the Masons or the Odd Fellows or whatever it might be. They actually want to belong to something. They just don't know how to engage and get into it. It's really interesting. And what he also found is that people like you and I, who are, I wouldn't say knee deep, or neck deep in fraternity with all the different things that we do. What's interesting is people like you and I, some people might be disappointed when I say this, we're going to live a whole lot longer than people who aren't engaged in a club or a fraternity or a group. Because again, social scientists are finding that if you engage with people, if you're dedicated to a common cause, if there's something that you find important in your life that's going to make you a better person, or you're helping people in your community, you will live longer. You'll be a prosperous, more fulfilled human being.
Hmm.
That's why he wrote the book, made the video, the movie called Join or Die, and that's exactly what it's about. So anybody listening to this, you can watch that. I believe it's still on Netflix. All right. And I would strongly suggest you watch it. It is a really great testimony to fraternity. It's a great testimony to who we are as individuals who are involved in fraternity. And just basically people who want to be part of a group. They want that social aspect of it. And again, even though when you watch Join or Die, it's teaming with Masonic logos and all kinds of different things. It doesn't have to be Freemason; it can be anything. But get yourself involved in something, and that's really what he's saying in the documentary. And it's a fabulous documentary. It's very interesting. In
Yeah.
fact, I just saw in Pennsylvania, there was a group of men getting together to actually show that in one of the Masonic lodges. And I don't know what their turnout was. I hope it was good. But it's an eye-opening documentary. It's really amazing, and I strongly suggest anybody who hasn't seen it, please watch it. It's really great.
Yeah, I think every lodge should just rent a couple pizzas, or not rent, should buy a couple pizzas and have
Yeah,
somebody bring in their Netflix password and just throw it up on a screen. And
I agree.
it's very eye opening. The other thing that got to me too was the overlay, as you kind of teased about, with, you know, societies and cultures and people that are happy and there's a sense of community and how they're
Yeah,
engaged and get involved and everybody thrives.
yeah,
And part of him talking about this was the actual studies that he did in Italy when Putnam was living in Italy. But the other part was just all of this research, this
yeah,
mounds of data. And we're going to switch over to some of the information that you provided that was during your speech at the Grand Lodge session for the Grand Lodge of New York in May, where I'm standing there on the sidelines, being the next one getting ready to talk. And I'm like, what is Bob
yeah.
saying? Everybody is so quiet, paying attention. So walk us through some of these data points.
Sure. So what you're going to be looking at is the first round is data from the Grand Lodge of New York. And what you'll notice is, and I apologize, a bit of an eye chart, but if you work from my screen is from the left to the right. So if you work from 2024 to 1990, this is the Grand Lodge of New York percentage of retained members by year joined. So if we look at 2024, all right, we retained of all the men that joined Freemasonry in the Grand Lodge of New York in 2024, we retained 99% of them. All right, because you're always going to have that 1% that said, you know what, I thought this was something different. This isn't for me. I lost my job. I'm moving out of state. And Wednesdays is the lodge night. I got to wash my hair. Who knows? There's a bunch of different reasons why they're not going to come to lodge. What's interesting though about this graphic, and we'll show the Northern Masonic jurisdiction as well, and this is where you'll see, how the story doesn't really change, quite frankly, is you'll notice on this next slide at the blue line is SNMPD, which is folks that have gone NPD or suspensions. The orange line is deceased, all right. Then there's the green line, which is other losses, which is again, this is not for me. And the top, that jagged line is total losses. What's interesting, and it's also disturbing at the same time, is from 2024 to 1990, we'll work back, or either way, it doesn't matter. We actually year over year over year over year lose more men in fraternity in the Grand Lodge of New York to retention than we do to death,
Hmm.
or we lose, or to other losses, as we put it. All right. So for instance, when you go, this starts in 2024. So let's go to about 2008. All right. 45% of our men are gone. All right. Because the retention it's just not there. All right. And you'll see the numbers fluctuate, but they're hit around 50%. Now, someone could look at this graph and say, well, as the years go backwards and they go to 1990, men are going to be passing away. That's correct. However, and that line does go up. However, though, the retention story still stays the same. We're not retaining members as well as we could. All right. So that's why when I go through this slide deck with anyone, whether it's a Scottish Rite audience or a Grand Lodge audience, I'll say, it's not a death problem, it's a retention problem. And that sounds kind of strange when I say that, but when I show them these slides, unfortunately, you can't hear a cricket in the room because everyone is like, wow, this is unbelievable. It's almost a gasp when you show them this, but it's the truth. If you could go to the NMJ slides.
Well,
See,
if I could just jump in real quick, when
sure.
we talk about NPD for people unfamiliar with it, as Bob mentioned, that's non-payment of dues.
Yep.
And yes, it's something that you get dropped because it's not that you didn't just pay this year, but you also didn't pay for many years beforehand. And the lodge has been trying to get in touch with you to find out what's going on. So people that get dropped from non-payment of dues, they are basically, as the kids these days say, they are ghosting the fraternity.
That's exactly correct. And that's a great analogy. And I'm not above plagiarism, so I'm stealing that. I love that. So that's awesome. About 100%. You're right. They're ghosting. You want to go? This is the NMJ. Perfect. So NMJ, if you notice this again, this is just not about Freemasonry with the Blue Lodge. It also affects the concordant body. So again, this is the NMJ. Again, 2024 to 1990. And you'll notice it's almost identical. It's almost identical. Sometime what I should do is I should do a overlay of NMJ versus the Grand Lodge, and
Mm.
I'd be curious to see how close they are. But the percentages are there, and it's that downward slope, which is unfortunate. Go to the next slide, and you'll see the same story. All right, where that blue line, that suspension line, it's much higher than everyone else's. Now, obviously, when you get to the 1990s, 91s, 92s, there's where the orange line and the which is death, the cease line and the suspension line gets pretty close. It was interesting when I was talking about this. I was we have a thing at the Supreme Council called Committee Week, and that's when all our committees come in and they talk about all different aspects of what keeps the fraternity moving. And when we were talking about this, I'm on two membership committees, and it was interesting. The Sovereign Grand Commander, illustrious Walt Wheeler, was in the room, and he looked at he's seen this data, and I'm going through it, and he goes, Bob, can you stop for a minute? And I said, sure. And he said, Bob's being kind. And I said, what do you mean by that? He goes, he's only talking about the suspension line, the blue line. He says, you really want to know what keeps me up at night? What makes me sleep with the light on is take the orange line and combine it with the suspension line, the death and the deceased line. Now that's a problem. And you know what? He's 100% right. Because death we can't stop. All right, that's going to happen. It's the natural cycle of life. However, we do know that the suspension line we can stop. And I'll tell you something. It's very simple. We know that if we communicate with brothers, they're going to stay. We know that if we offer them a strong program, they're going to stay. All right. We know that if we offer them value, they're going to stay. All right. And it's as simple as that. That's why in the NMJ we have a program called the Brother to Brother Calling Program. We make sure that our valleys are calling all their members at least once or twice a year to check in and say, "Hey, how you doing? What's going on? How are you? How are you?" You and I have been in the Grand Lodge building of New York City, down in New York City, our own Grand Lodge building. And you can tell a lodge that's thriving because there's chatter in the room. You can tell a lodge that's dying because it's quiet. All right.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing going on. And what they're doing is they're engaging their members with great public speakers. They're engaging their members with great programming. They're bringing something into the lodge that everyone says, you know what, I'll put on a suit and I'll drive down to 23rd Street in Manhattan. I'll find a place to park. I'll deal with congestion pricing, and I'll go to the city. And you know what? Because I really want to be at my lodge. I want to be around these men, but I also want to hear what's going to go on tonight. I commonly kid around and I say, no one wants to, put on a suit, drive out on a cold winter night, go to a lodge building, sit there and give $75 to the Rainbow Girls, pay the heating bill, complain that the oil prices are too high, close the lodge, and then go downstairs and eat crumb cake and drink coffee. Nobody wants to do that. All right. And if you do that consistently, you're going to lose people. You're absolutely going to lose people. So it's simple. It's just simple communication, picking up the phone, checking on people, making sure they're good. Haven't seen you in a while. Would love to see you at lodge or at the Valley. Great programming, and really, asking these members, what do you want? What are you here for? What are you looking for? Especially with the new generation that's coming in. These millennial folks. I mean, I listen. I have 3 kids, and 2 of them are millennials. And when I ask them about Freemasonry, that's what they'll say to me, Dad, I'm really interested in what your degrees are all about. I'm really interested in the historical aspect of what the degree is about. I'm interested in the philosophical side of what your degrees are about. So if my lodge, my mother lodge, if they come into my lodge, we've got to change up the way we do things 100%. And that's the challenge, quite frankly, for a lodge or quite frankly for a valley. I have to tell you though, in the Scottish Rite, what we're doing, and I have to give credit where credit is due. Illustrious Sandy Carsons, he's the deputy for Vermont. Sandy is a retired college professor, and he's one of the best people I know. He's a great individual. In fact, he in a week or so, he's going to be the new Grand Master for the Grand Lodge of Vermont. So he's one of the hardest working men in show business. I get around with him all the time. But he has put a program on for us called Masters of the Rite. After we do Thursday Night of the Rite, which is our video series that we do in the winter months, and it's a great opportunity for a new brother to join Scottish Rite from the comfort of their home. Quite frankly, they can watch that 4th degree, and then they get the accompanying degree, the feature degree of the night. And we'll get anywhere between 1,500 to 1,800 men that'll watch that week over week over week, those degrees. And we have men that obviously join the Rite. But what Sandy Carsons has done, he's created a program called Masters of the Rite. And let's say, for instance, week 1 is the 4th degree, which is always the standard degree, and they do the 18th degree. And this is all done on video. The following week, what Sandy will do is he'll have a discussion for 1 hour about that 18th degree, and he'll open it up and say, well, you know what, the 18th degree is an exemplary of our 3 core values over here, and this is what they were trying to do, and this person, he was fictitious, but the other person was real, and what are some of the overriding thoughts in this degree? What did you get away from it? And what the brothers can do is they can actually type in chat, a response, or something that they feel the degree is about. And he just goes off on these different things, and he'll say, you're right, that is biblical, you're right, that that is about human rights and things that
Mm,
I would never even think about. And he is so fantastic at that. But the great thing about that is I do tech support for him when he does this, and I'm physically exhausted, and I'm not saying anything or doing anything, but it's amazing how much information he's got in his head. But it's great the way the brothers have just really been drawn to this conversation, because you know what, the days of just sitting and watching a degree are really over. Now what we want is, what did that degree mean? What does that degree mean to me in 2025? What does that degree mean to me as a man, and a father or a friend or a brother? What does it all mean? And how can I apply and become a better human being? And quite frankly, that's what we're about anyway.
yeah.
So, and we do that. So we do a great job with that in the Scottish Rite.
Well, I like that you laid out like a instant, like if you're looking for some way to turn this battleship around, and we know it takes
Yep,
a mile to do that in open water or aircraft
yep,
carrier. Here's a quick way to do it. Get back to the basics. Talk about the experience, the ritual, what it means. Give those simple lessons. For
yep,
lodges, you'll hear guys say, "Well, we can't afford to this. We can't afford." Understandable. You don't have to do a table lodge or festive board before or
absolutely.
after. There are other things that you can accomplish. My question is, I look at this and I hear, I've been a Mason for 10 years now myself. I've heard about this membership issue since, I finished taking that third degree application. It seemed like everybody had been talking about it. I kind of equate it to other things that are natural phenomenons that are occurring. Some of them man-made, others maybe it's just the environment or God putting his thumb on the scale. But where are we when it comes to the scale in this membership crisis? You deal with this every day. Like, how much time, or is there time for us to turn this around?
Well, I will often say, and I mean this with every fiber of my body, I think Freemasonry's best days are still ahead of us. All right, and I look at life from the glass is always half full. It's not half empty. All right, I think that the days of, let me break this down. I think the days of us having 190,000 Masons in a Grand Lodge, I think those days are gone. I'll wave
Mm,
that white flag. All right, but I'll tell you something. I think a lot of those men joined Freemasonry because it was just the thing to do. All right. I remember the night I joined D. Malay. I'll never forget this. I joined in Brooklyn, New York. I belonged to Teddy Roosevelt chapter in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. And I walked into the lodge building, and I'm looking up at the past masters of Bay Ridge Lodge. And I go, that's our butcher. That's my postman. That's our milkman. That's my
nice.
father's lawyer. That's the man who owns the store next to my father's funeral home. And I'm like, I had no idea that these men were Masons. All right. And I don't even know if they were really active. They were probably active at one time because they were master of the lodge, but I never knew they were Masons. And it almost fogged my brain that I literally knew like an entire row of these men because I knew them outside in my world as a kid growing up. But I don't know if, and I'm not saying it didn't mean something for them to be a Mason, but I think today what we've done is there's a subsection of people that are now saying, you know what, I'm not joining this because I have to. I'm joining this because I want to. All right, and I think that I'd rather have in my lodge, I'd rather have 100 guys who go, I really want to be part of this because I really love what Freemasonry is about. I love the community aspect of it. I love the ritual aspect of it. I love the historical aspect of it. And those are the kind of men I think we need to reach out to. All right.
Mm,
Are there 190,000 of them? I'm not sure. Maybe there is. If there is, well, that's awesome. I think there's less of those kind of people, quite honestly, and I think we need to find them. I think the way we find them and the way we make our membership rolls go up is by presenting Freemasonry in a modern way. All right. I think that we've got to say to individuals who are interested in our fraternity, you know what? This is the way we used to do things. Our core competencies are going to stay the same, but we want your opinion. We want you to help us make the lodge journey better, the lodge in the community better. All right. I got to tell you, I've talked to a lot of men in Freemasonry, and I'll say, "What are you doing to attract millennials?" And they'll actually turn to me and go, "What's a millennial?" All right. They have no idea what that is. I
yeah.
mean, so that's strike number one. And then I'll say, okay, well, this is what a millennial is. And they'll look around the room and they go, we're all 70. All right. Well, that's, I get it. I get it. But you can't tell me that there aren't people in this community that are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s, all right, that are good people that have Masonic morals. They just don't know it. And they'd probably be very interested in what you guys are doing here, but you're not reaching out and you're not talking to them. All right.
Hmm.
I'll say, are you involved in the community? No. All right. Are you holding anything in this building other than meetings that can attract the community to come in and see what you're doing? Hold a blood drive. Open your kitchen up for preparation for a food bank. Something like that. Do you have scouts coming into the building? No, 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 no. If you're checking all those boxes, well, what do you expect? I mean, um, so I think that Freemasonry it's got a rich history. I think people want to know about it. I think there's a population of men that are very interested in what we have. I think it has to be presented and brought to them in the right light and say, you know what? This is something we want you to be part of. We're looking for you. We want you to be part of us. All right.
Mm.
I don't know if we do that. I really don't. I truly believe that. I mean, we need to do that. We need to embrace this generation and say, we want you to be part of who we are.
It's interesting you went there because I was going back to the Join or Die with Bob Putnam, and as a Freemason, as someone that's in a fraternal organization, watching his whole outline of like step, 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 the charts are all going down, and it was that last slide. He's like, well, but yet while we're in decline and we might be in this, nobody wants to join the non-joiners.
Yep.
He's like, the good news is we'll bottom out and then we'll start to go back up.
Exactly.
So do you feel that we have this verge that there'll be a return to groups and the call to want to be a part of a social organization?
Yeah, I do. I think that I think everyone got real tired after the pandemic. I think everyone didn't like being in their houses. I think everybody looks Zoom is great and all these different profile or software programs that we have to talk to one another. But I think everyone now wants to get out and experience the world. I was talking to a young lady who's involved in the travel industry, and she said to me, she said, try to book a hotel in a major city like Vegas or Dallas, Texas, places like that. You can't get a hotel room because people are traveling and they're saying, you know what? I had all those years missed during COVID. Now I want to catch up. I think that there are men that are saying, you know what? I put off being a part of something. My great grandfather was a Mason because I have his ring, or my dad was a Mason, or my next door neighbor was a Mason, or my science teacher in high school was a Mason. You know what? There had to be something to this. I want to find out more about it. I don't think they understand how to go about finding out about who we are. And I think sometimes, unless someone is actually trained or really good at public speaking to present who we are in a logical, strategic way, that's quite frankly something that someone would want to gravitate towards. I mean, I truly believe. Let's think of it this way: if you and I were to knock on a lodge door and we said to a lodge, "What do you do?" and we heard nothing, you and I join that group? Probably not. All right. But if we, excuse me, we went down the street and we knocked on another lodge door and they said, "Oh yeah, come on in. We have people invested in the community. We're part of the community day. We help clean up a park. We go help at a food bank. We have a reading program for children. We work with what we call concordant bodies, and it's a way you can expand your horizons within the fraternity. And you know what? We want younger members to come in. They're welcoming. All right. It's a big difference of those two lodges. Let's be honest. I mean, that's the kind of lodge I would want to join. I mean, it really is. I mean,
Yep.
I will tell you, you're going to laugh at this. When I was a young Mason, I remember before I actually became a Mason, I remember somebody said to me, "Which lodge are you joining?" And I told him, and he said, "That's a good lodge." He says, "But you want to know the truth?" I said, "What's that?" He goes, "Find out from your friends who are Masons, the lodge that has the most money and the oldest guys, and just be really patient." He says, "And then you'll be able to run it the way you want to." And I said, "Well, I don't want to wait around 10 years for everybody to die. I don't want that." I said, "I want this to be a great experience and a great journey from day one." And I was very blessed to get into a really terrific lodge. So, I mean, which is a great lodge in Brooklyn, New York. So, very, very lucky to do that. So, I think again, when I joined, and I was a DMLA guy, I thought I knew fraternity, but Freemasonry was a totally different bag. And you know what? I was very blessed to have a great mentor. I was very blessed to join a great lodge that embraced me and said, "What are you looking for? What do you want out of it?" I knew a lot of guys in the lodge, so it was a great experience. It was really great. So I was very blessed to do that.
Yeah.
Very.
I've heard that advice is funny. And for every, if I'm out visiting 10 lodges, for every 8 or 9 that are struggling with just barely enough guys that are present that night to open the lodge, there's the 2 that have more visitors. And I mean visitors, not just brothers from other lodges, but
Sure.
interested gentlemen, prospects, whatever term you want to use,
Yep.
there than other lodges have that just are combined attendance. It's amazing. And you're like, well, what's the secret sauce? And that's a conversation for another podcast. You've
Absolutely.
given a lot of great basics that I think just anyone listening can be like, okay, it's kind of the old John Kennedy adage, like one person can make a difference. Everybody should
Absolutely.
try. Kind of got to start trying somewhere. But a lot of these initiatives, the bigger answers to the larger problems, that's going to come from the leaders above us. We're talking about Grand Lodge leaders. We're talking about
Yeah,
Supreme Council leadership.
sure.
As someone now who's on both sides of this, what should we be asking them? What should we be looking from them to do when it comes to getting us through this?
Yeah, I'm gonna give the credit again where credit is due. And I heard, Sovereign Grand Commander Wheeler say this the other day. He travels a lot. He travels way more than I do, and he talks to Grand Lodges all the time, and he talks to other concordant bodies all the time. Whether it's York Rite bodies, it's other Scottish Rite bodies, Prince Hall, doesn't matter. And what's interesting and what he said was systemically everyone has the same problems. Okay, no matter what group you're in, systemically everyone has the same problems. And he said, and when he travels, he said, you know what? Rather than worry about the problems individually, why don't we worry about the problems together? And let's harness that energy and let's harness all this gray matter up here, all the great smart people that we have. Because he said, you can't tell me that if we put our heads together as one unified team, we can't overcome this. And I think if I got all the grandmasters in a room, and quite frankly, I kind of did when I spoke at the conference of grandmasters, and I talked about our ambassador program, I talked about our right guide program, our mentoring program, I spoke about the Grand Lodge retention program, and if I was able to get those men again, I was off script, I'd say, hey guys, you know what? You don't need me, you don't need all these other people. To get together and just say, okay, how can we together come up with some initiatives that we all can really benefit from that are going to turn the tide together? You know, is the Grand Lodge of Ohio got a certain program that's really great, that's crushing it? Why don't we use that? Well, the Scottish Rite has got the Not Just a Man of Mason program. Let's use that. I think the Sovereign Grand Commander was spot on when he said let's team up, let's do this together. Um, and I really think honestly, at the end of the day, that would really turn the tide of where we're at. I just don't know if all of our Grand Lodges and all concordant bodies are of that mindset. I don't know. All right, it's out of my pay grade. It's not my swim lane, as they say. So I can only do what I can do. But I would say that's the way to really look at it, quite frankly.
We started this conversation with you asking me how long can we go for? Are we good for? I got a couple questions left. You good for
Yeah,
some bonus
yeah, yeah.
time? All right.
No, absolutely.
All right, let's do this. So I'm really happy to have this extra time with you, Right Worshipful Brother Siebold, newly minted, Right Worshipful at large for the Grand Lodge of New York. He's also 33rd degree Master Freemason and the Assistant Director of Membership Retention for the Scottish Rite Northern Masonic
Close,
Jurisdiction Supreme
close
Council.
enough. Close
Close.
enough. Close enough.
We'll have to clean that up in editing.
That's right.
So my question is, I'm not happy. I'm not satisfied with being one of those guys that's just going to sit back and say, hey, like these other things everybody's talking about, I'm just going to let, time, it's all going to work itself out. I'm okay. This is just a natural thing. I'm one of those people that wants to jump in and at least do something and want to hear ideas on how to improve it. And
Yep.
one of the ideas that we've discussed in a past episode here on the Craftsmen Online podcast was with Brother Matthew Brockbank, who also shared his data with us on the Grand Lodge of New York, our strategic planning committee, our job is to specifically address the membership retention interview. And his idea was an exit interview or a survey for Masons or brothers who have left the craft. What are you learning from these men who have left, and how are we incorporating this feedback to make things better?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked me that. Our marketing communications team has done that, quite frankly. And I don't have their data in front of me. So unfortunately, I don't have that to talk to you about. But I can tell you from a personal perspective. One of the things that I do every day, Monday through Friday from 8 to 4, is our phone rings off the wall. All right. And two calls that I hate to receive is my father, my brother, my uncle, whoever it might be, has passed away. That means
Mm.
I've got to go into our database and put another brother as deceased, and that's a shame because someone's life is over. But the other call that I don't like getting, and thank goodness I've been getting a lot of these recently. But the other call I always get is, can you help me demit? All right, how do I demit out of the Scottish Rite? And I don't want to put someone on the spot and say, well, why are you leaving? All right, I don't want to do that. But what I will say is, gee, that's a shame, brother. It's we don't want to lose you. What can I do to assist you? And then I'll hear this. Well, and then the story starts. All right,
Mm.
and it always goes this way. No one ever calls me. I feel totally disconnected from the valley. Number two, I really don't know what's going on. All right, because no one picks up the phone and tells me, hey, this is what the valley's doing. Or three, I've gone to some things and it's very cliquish. No one talks to me. I feel like I'm the odd man out. No one takes the time to sit with me at a reunion. I kind of eat by myself. No one shakes my hand. Hello. And you know what? I say to myself, why be bothered? Why be bothered? Why be part of this? All right. And you know what? I'll say to them, "Oh, that's a shame. That's not the way we're supposed to operate or behave as Scottish Rite Masons. Is there anything that I can do? If I could put a call into the Valley for you, is something I can do?" Unfortunately, they're at that point where they're like, "No, you know what? I'm going to stay a Blue Lodge Mason. I'm not really that active in this, but I'll always keep my membership. All right." So I go out of my way to make sure that I convey that sentiment to the Valley secretary, because those are the ones I talk to most of the time. And they'll say, "Oh, you know what? That's too bad," or maybe this guy moved and we didn't follow up. But they'll admit, maybe we didn't call him, maybe we didn't be as proactive as we should be. And hopefully, all I can hope for, quite frankly, is that they learned a lesson in this one brother who's demitted, and they move on.
Mm.
So I can always tell you emphatically, from my perspective, of the phone calls that I'm getting, it's again, no communication. I'm not really grooving on the programming for whatever. All right. Um, and no one listens to me or no one talks to me. All right. We call this a fraternity. And if you think a fraternity is about coming together for one common purpose, and sometimes that's not happening. All right. I would say, excuse me, for the most part, I would say the opposite is happening. I think our valleys go out of their way to communicate, to offer great programming, to check in on individuals who maybe aren't great. We One of the things we do in the Scottish Rite, which I love, 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 is we send out holiday cards, and we send a lot of it's virtual, but we send out birthday cards, and that, again, that's virtual. And I always get a response back. If someone sends me a response, thank you very much. I'll always send them a response back. Hope you're doing well. Whatever it might be. And what's really great is these men feel that somebody cares about them, which I do care about them. I genuinely do. The other day, I had a brother who he got his birthday card and said, "Have recently had a tornado in my area. We're now in assisted living. My wife and I don't get out that much. Our health is bad." So I called up the Valley secretary, and he said, geez, he said, it's funny. I just spoke to him about a week or so ago to see if he was coming to the reunion to see if he needed a ride. He said he wasn't feeling well, but I don't know anything about this tornado thing. I'm going to make sure I call him back and check in with him immediately. That's a home run. I mean, that's
Mm.
a home run. That's what we should be doing. I don't know if we've got that personal touch in the whole fraternity. I hope we would. I mean, but I can tell you, it's stories like that warm my heart. But again, we're losing these men because they feel disconnected. They don't get communicated to, and they feel that they're left out.
Mm.
And they just don't get into the whole programming because they don't understand it. If I ask you to come to a reunion, well, you're going to laugh. Okay, I'm in my first year of Scottish Rite, and I remember one of my best friends. He calls me and said, "You're going to the reunion," and I'm thinking reunion. I'm thinking high school reunion, and I go, so what does that mean? And he goes, "Oh, we have a reunion in Scottish Rite." I said, "Does that mean I get together with all the guys who joined the same day I did?" He goes, "Well, no, it's we come and we do degrees." Nobody explained that to me. I had no
Right.
idea what it meant. All right. As soon as he explained it to me, I was like, "Yeah, I'm in. Let's go." All right. But if somebody doesn't explain it to you, again, there's that disconnect. There's you don't understand what the programming's about. You're not going to go because no
Yeah.
one's no one's taking the time to pick up the phone and tell you.
I think it's some of the simplest words to describe the biggest problem. It's like we got to make Freemasonry, as you're pointing out, somewhat fun again to be a member.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Not like we need to go super crazy over the top, but like let's make it more fun. Let's make it more enjoyable. Let's make it more respectful again. Like we're coming together to do this thing, and we're dressed a certain way, and we're properly attired. We're taking
Absolutely.
our love for this very seriously and how we practice it seriously. And then let's also talk about like our experiences and how this is really improving us to be better. Those are some of the best
Absolutely.
lodge discussions I've ever had, is when men actually open up and share this.
Yeah.
I want to touch base on something you mentioned that, I mean, it still sticks with me. It was the worst thing I had to do as master of my lodge, and that's drop the gavel on the night when you NPD brothers for not paying their dues. That's what NPD stands for. And
Yeah.
we had talked about there's several instances where a lodge, the secretary, I know I was making personal phone calls, especially if you know the brother that's about to get their NPD, and you're
Yep.
like, dude, do you need help? Is this a financial situation? Like, what can we do for you? And I've seen lodges that, try to cut deals with these guys where it's like, well, if
Sure.
you could just pay some of this or your per capita. When I looked at the data that you had shared, that was the number one trend line that was
Yeah.
happening with where we're going with this membership issue. How do we fix the NPD issue?
Well, I think it goes back to what I just talked about. I mean, I think if you're in communication with people, I think that makes a big difference. But out of the gate, you're communicating with them. I think out of the gate, if you're mentoring them, then they feel attached to what the group's about, and they feel
Mm,
attached to an individual. They feel attached to their mentor. All right. I think that makes a big difference. If you just have someone come and get their 3 degrees of masonry, and then you never call them again, all right, or the same with a Scottish Rite Valley. You get your 4th degree, 14th degree, whatever it is, and you don't talk to them until the reunion that happens, let's say in the spring. Why would this guy want to stay connected if no one's connecting with him? It's on us. That's on us to connect with the new person. Um, and yeah, I've been in situations like that. I was secretary of a lodge, and I kid around with people and say, you know, uh, if you've ever been a secretary of a Masonic lodge, when your time comes and you stand before the gates of eternity, St. Peter's going to say, "Come on in, man. You already went through hell being a secretary." Um, it's the God's honest truth. I mean,
right.
that's a tough job. I mean, there's no getting around that. Um, but I mean, when I was commander in chief, it was during COVID, and we had a lot of guys joining, which was great. But we had a lot of guys who went sideways for whatever reason. And I'll tell you, we did the FedEx thing where we sent FedEx letters to people. We did, calling, consistently calling. No one ever returned phone calls. Actually, I had one brother. He did this on his own. He said, give me envelopes, give me the letters, give whatever we have to give these people. I'll drive to their house. And he did, knocked on doors and left
Mm,
envelopes, and still we had no one call us back. So again, I kind of chalked that up to maybe it was a bad decision on their part. This is something they don't want to do. I did have a couple of brothers who actually, when I was commander in chief, reach out to me and say, I've lost my job because of COVID. I have a family member who's really sick because of COVID, and I just don't have time for this, and I don't have the extraneous funds to pay 2 or 3 years of dues. I just don't have it. And then we try to make a deal with people as well and say, hey, if you can pay your per capita, stay. And they said, I just lost interest, and that's going to happen.
mm,
That's going to happen. So I I wish I knew a better way to get around that. But I think again, I'll fall back to those things I said before. I think it's mentoring. I think it's communication. I think it's having a vested interest in people and saying, you know what, I really care about you, and I want you to stay here. I want you to be part of this. You know, it's I think that's very important. I really do. I think, and it's nothing new, quite honestly. I think people for millennial have wanted that the same thing,
mm.
quite honestly. So
I know you could talk about this all night, so I got one question left before I let you go back
yeah,
upstairs to
yeah,
your
yeah,
wife.
absolutely.
I really want to thank you again for coming on the podcast and for the extra time you gave us. It's really important for our listener and brothers across New York State to know that the Grand Lodge is proactively working on a long-term solution, not just a quick fix, but a long-term solution to our membership problem. Um, I often think of little things that I see lodges doing, go, wow, this is really just a sign of hope or very encouraging. From lately, it's been a lot of the affinity lodges or groups that are popping up. So these like cigar clubs that brothers are doing, or they're practicing different styles of ritual or in different languages, or they're finding unique ways to connect outside of the lodges, like the Widow Sons with like these motorcycle clubs that are going on. Is there anything that you're seeing that gives you hope or maybe encouragement that you could offer to Masons or those that are in the valley so that we can look to a bright future for us?
Well, for me, when you and I both were at our Grand Lodge in New York State, for me, one of the highlights of that 2 days that we were there, was when that new lodge that is all derived of Puerto Rican descendants.
Waibana, yeah.
Yeah, I was really happy for those guys. All right. I don't know the name of the shirt they wear, but they all had the same ceremonial shirt on. They had really cool aprons on, and they were so excited to bring this group together, because not only were they celebrating Freemasonry, but they were celebrating their heritage. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. All right, that's
Hmm.
an amazing thing. So I think there's moments like that we need to embrace, quite frankly, and I think that's, for me, that's the ray of hope. All right, that you have men that still care so much about this, that they're willing to say, you know what, I'm of a certain descent, or I come from some ethnic background, and I want to create a lodge for men of the same thought and like. And I think that's wonderful. However, if you're not, in this case, they're Puerto Rican. If you're not Puerto Rican, we want you too. All right. We want you to join our lodge, because at the end of the day, it's about brotherly love. I love that. All right.
Hmm.
I love that. Plus, I'd love to go to one of their meetings, because Puerto Rican food is amazing. I
It
have to
is,
like it a lot.
yeah.
It really is. Let's be
Yeah.
honest. I mean, but I said that to one of the guys, and back to the new master, he started laughing. He goes, "You're welcome anytime, brother." And that's amazing to me. I love that. I mean, it's and that to me is the ray of hope. Like, for instance, from a Scottish Rite perspective, there's a couple of states. I know Massachusetts has one. They have a Scottish Rite Lodge. All right, where you have to be a Scottish Rite Mason to
Hmm.
join that lodge. And you also have to, if you're going to be an entered apprentice in that lodge, you have to be willing to not only take the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry, but you have to be willing to take the 4th degree and become a Scottish Rite Mason in the Valley of Boston. I think that's a pretty cool way to sell not only Freemasonry, but sell a concordant body. All right, I kid around with those guys, and I call it the +1 lodge, and they always laugh, but it's the truth. you
Yeah.
know. So again, it's something that they feel so strongly about the right, that they inculcate that into the fiber of a lodge. So I think that's a wonderful thing. I mean, and you know what? It could be something as simple as, not even an ethnic thing. We're going to meet on Saturday, because that's what lodge is that in New York City? St. Cecilia's? Is it St. Cecilia's? It's the Actors Lodge. I think that's the one.
Okay.
Uh, and I think they meet on Saturdays, and I think they meet in the morning, because a lot of those folks are involved in the television and Broadway industry. So nighttime is their work time. They can't come to a standard lodge meeting. So for them, that's a perfect time, but they still get to be Masons. All
Yep.
right. And I love that. So I think it's the diversity, quite frankly, that folks are looking for. And I think it's something that, is going to keep us moving forward. That's why, again, I really think the glass is half full. It's not half empty, for sure. So whatever we can do, quite honestly, that's going to make this different and unique and fun. As you said before, let's bring the fun back. That's what these men are looking for in fraternity today. So I'm sure we can do that if we put our heads together. Again, I'll quote the Sovereign Grand Commander: "Think of what we could do if we all rode in the same boat the same way." And he's right. He's 100%
Mm,
right. So
love that.
yep.
Right worshipful brother Bob Siebold. Have you gotten used to when somebody says right worshipful, you're not looking around like who?
You know what? It's funny. It's funny. I'm going to get the apron sometime in the fall, and I said to my wife, it's not official till they put it around my waist. So then I guess I'm okay. But no, I'm excited about it. That was excuse me, I've allergies. That was quite an honor. It was quite shocking, to be quite honest. And it was nice, a great moment. I have a nice photograph from that, which was taken by some brothers in my valley, actually, that were there. So it'll be a moment I will never forget.
Yeah.
And it's quite nice. So totally out of left field that came. Let me tell you what. So
Well,
you know,
definitely well earned. We know that it was for a lot of the efforts that you've done to address this problem. And now that you've got the apron, or getting the apron, the
getting
future work you're going to do to keep
That's right.
getting to put it
That's
on.
right. That's right. I remember when I got my 33rd degree, I was going to the ceremony, and here I am in Tails. I was with a good friend from my valley, and this brother gets on. He was already at 33rd, and he congratulates both of us, and he said, "I'll see you in about an hour over at the hall." And he says, "Remember, you got that 33rd for not what you've done, but for what you're going to do." And he was spot on. He's 100% right. And I remember 2 weeks after, you're going to laugh at this. 2 weeks after we get our 33rd, we're at a Valley reunion, and here we are, the freshly minted 33rds. All the 32nd degree guys are inside yucking it up. He and I are washing dishes, and I said, "Hey, wait a minute, I, what's going on here? And he goes, remember what the guy said in the elevator? It's not what we did. It's what we're going to do. And I said, pass the dawn. Let's go. I mean,
Yeah.
that's part of it, man. I mean, it's
Yep.
all, and that's the one thing I think I love about Freemasonry. It's that selfless service to others. I love that aspect of it. I really do. So
Yep.
we can talk about that all night too. So, but I'll let you go. You got to do things too, I'm sure.
Oh, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Right Worshipful Bob Sebald. Thank you for your time on this episode of the Craftsman Online podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.